What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the name Rudy Gobert? Many people remember the big Frenchman for things that seem to be negative. And I mean, yeah, he was the guy that was the first NBA player to get COVID-19 for just goofing around. He destroyed his relationship with the Utah Jazz's franchise player while he was on the team, and just 12 months ago assaulted a teammate during a timeout. Seems crazy, right? With a resume like that, it's hard to believe that such a player could be in the NBA, much less be so important in the NBA. However, there are reasons why the Utah Jazz offered him a $205 million contract for 5 seasons. And there are reasons why the Minnesota Timberwolves offered 5 first-round draft picks for the French center during the summer of 2022. The truth is that Gobert is quite simply one of the best defenders in league history. The advanced stats have always shown his impact on the game, and the regular season record of the 2 teams he's been on has been more than decent. But just as we fans have to learn to differentiate art from the artist, Kanye! Sorry. We should be able to differentiate the player from his personality. So, is it actually fair to hate Rudy Gobert? Yeah, I know advanced stats aren't always an accurate representation of reality, more so in the case of a big man who are usually rewarded more readily in this regard. But Gobert's advanced stats? Damn, they look like that of a generational player. The French center is the 5th best active player and the 26th best in NBA history in defensive BPM. He's the 2nd best active player in defensive rating, the 2nd best active player in block percentage, and he's also the 6th best active player in defensive win shares. But the surprising thing about him are also his advanced offensive stats. Gobert is the best player in NBA history in true shooting percentage, the 2nd best player in history in effective field goal percentage, the 17th best active player in player efficiency rating, and he has the best offensive player rating in NBA history. Rudy seems to be dominating not only on defense. Although he's not a technically good offensive player by league standards, and although his offensive volume is much lower than that of any other NBA star, Gobert does indeed make his teams better offensively. His time with the Jazz already proved that. After not playing much during his rookie season, Rudy became one of the 2 pillars of the Salt Lake City team during his sophomore year. Quinn Snyder was able to appreciate his abilities early on, and at just 22 years old, Gobert finished 5th in the Defensive Player of the Year race. Thanks to Donovan Mitchell and the Frenchmen, the Jazz managed to qualify for the playoffs in 6 consecutive seasons. However, they never advanced past the Western Conference semifinal. In 2020, Rudy became world famous for performing one of the stupidest acts in NBA history. After a press conference, the center mocked the COVID-19 news by touching all the microphones, which are normally a major source of disease transmission, a gesture that even cracked some laughs from the journalists who were there. But man, neither he nor any of us knew what would end up happening. It was March 11th, 2020. The Thunder were hosting Gobert's Jazz in Oklahoma City. And although everything seemed routine, something strange was going on. The game wouldn't start. All the players were wondering what the hell was delaying the start of the game, everyone except Rudy Gobert. The center was absent, and when the news came out, it all made sense. Rudy was the first player in the league to get COVID-19. Gobert, in a way, shut down the entire $8 billion NBA. The NBA season was suspended indefinitely, and it would end up being resumed during that summer in the bubble. I mean, if Gobert hadn't done the Mikes fiasco, the outcome would have been the same. Every league and every sport around the globe stopped their ongoing seasons, but Rudy had already infected several members of his team with COVID, one of them being Donovan Mitchell. And that's where things started going wrong. That's when the shooting guard's relationship with the center began to deteriorate. And after Utah accumulated another early exit during the 2022 playoffs, the franchise decided it was time to move on. Gobert was traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for an incredible haul of assets that included Malik Beasley, Leandro Balmaro, Patrick Beverley, Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, 4 first-round draft picks, and a swap right. Yeah, all that in exchange for one player. It wasn't LeBron, it wasn't KD, it wasn't Harden, and it wasn't Kyrie Irving, it was for one Rudy Gobert. But his first season in Minnesota didn't go the way he would have liked. The Wolves only managed a record of 42 wins and 40 losses, which helped them qualify for the playoffs. But the team fell in 5 games during the first round of the playoffs to the Denver Nuggets. The worst news of the season was not that predictable elimination. In the last game of the regular season against the New Orleans Pelicans, the French center threw a punch at teammate Kyle Anderson during an argument during a timeout. Something almost unprecedented during a game. I mean, we've all seen Draymond punching Jordan Poole in that infamous TMZ video, but that was at practice. This was a completely different story. It was the Wolves themselves that suspended Gobert during the play-in, but the fear of a locker room split was a threat to the development of a franchise that had some young players like Anthony Edwards. Fortunately for Chris Finch, the team's dynamic was far from being destroyed. In fact, it did a 180. The Wolves have managed to form what is, by numbers, the best defense in the NBA this season. And this wouldn't have happened without the addition of Gobert. Of course, the rise of Anthony Edwards has a lot to do with Minnesota becoming one of the best teams in the league, and so is the increased performance of Karl Anthony Towns, who with the presence of the Frenchmen can play much further away from the rim. But the glue man that's united the team and made them competitive throughout the regular season has undoubtedly been Rudy. Just 3 seasons ago, before Gobert's arrival, the Wolves were the 3rd worst defense in the NBA. Yeah, you heard that right. There were only 2 teams in the entire league that were defensively worse than Minnesota. Rudy has not only been able to translate his huge impact on this side of the court from Snyder's schemes to Finch's, Rudy's managed to change the culture of a franchise that had gone without 50 wins in a regular season since 2004. He's demonstrated his commitment to the team, and far from just milking his contract, he's imbued the Wolves with a spirit they were incapable of achieving on their own.
Hand off to Gobert. Gobert spinning on wembanyama, the fake and the slam!
And should Cat make it back in time for the playoffs, expect the Twin Towers along with Edwards to make some noise in the postseason this year. As an NBA fan, you can hate Rudy Gobert, that's your right. His personality doesn't seem like the nicest in the world, and his past actions show that he's a player with a special character. His style of play, in a way similar to Domantas Sabonis, lacks flashiness. When he's selected for the All-Star game, he's almost always chosen with one of the last selections. In short, his style of play is unimpressive to casual basketball fans. But as an NBA fan, there's one thing you can't say. You can't say that Gobert isn't one of the best defenders of at least this generation. Not just because he's been Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, which will almost certainly become 4 times by the end of this regular season. His impact on the defensive end, as evidenced by the record of the teams he's played for, is simply unmatched. His ability to protect the rim, thanks to his combination of IQ and his alien-like 7'9" wingspan, is clearly visible in the eye test. Moreover, in the meantime, he's managed to be one of the most offensively efficient players in NBA history. Was he overpaid when the Jazz offered him that max contract? Well, maybe, but do you think another team wouldn't have offered it to him? And did the Wolves overpay for him when they made the trade? Well, they might have. Certainly the assets that the new GM Tim Conley offered to get the center seem like enough to get an offensive superstar. But if you look at the standings as of today, all those doubts should dissipate. The Timberwolves, despite what everyone else thinks, made the right move. And Gobert, despite being one of the most hated players in the NBA, has proven that his impact is as real as it gets.